Welcome back. In this video I prep the body for final paintwork, I complete the painting and I start putting this bike back together. So this is the rear guard. There was a little bit of surface rust on here, so I just firstly clean it up and then I put some body filler just to fill in. There was a couple of little rust marks like I said, and a couple of dents as well. So fill that up, didn't really need that much, and once that was dry, just sand it and profile it to the right shape. And I'm using about 40 grit paper to start with, and then go down to about 240 grit, and that prepares it then for undercoat. So I clean up all the guards, and overall the bike was in pretty good condition. So for a bike that's 50 years old, there was very little rust and actually not that much body damage at all, which is really good. So I just take my time, get these all nice and straight. I did the same with the main frame, and as I said, very lucky there's no damage on this frame whatsoever. I just clean up any rust, and again it was only surface rust. Remove all the grease and years of grime that was in there, and then here's what all the parts look like once I'd prepared them all. And at this point they are ready to be primed. So what I did after this was I had to sort out the fuel tanks. You can see down the bottom on that seam, it was actually leaking on the seam, and I thought about TIG welding it, and then what I decided to do was flush it out, clean out the internals, and apply some Pour 15, which I've used a couple of times before, and you might have seen this on my XJ build. So this is a fuel tank sealer. It'll never rust again, and it will seal up those tiny little holes that are in that seam. So just pour it in there. Then what you do is you just keep rotating it around, and it sets like glass literally. It's really good coating this, so takes a few hours to set. So just here I just keep rotating it around to make sure I get a nice even coat, and I do drain some of it out because you obviously don't want an overload of Pour 15 in there. And that has sealed the tank and is good to go. So once again, get the sandblaster out. I've got the handlebars here just to show you how I clean these up. So there was quite a bit of surface rust actually on these handlebars for some unknown reason. It was probably the most rusty bit on the bike. So yep, get into it with the sand. Cleans up quite nice, and sandblasting makes it so much easier to get in all those nooks and crannies. So because this is bare metal, what I do is apply a bit of Etch Primer, and you do want to do this. You don't want to put primer straight on bare metal. So this Etch Primer does what it says. It basically etches in there, gives the undercoat something to stick to. Once it dries, here's a spray putty, couple of thin coats, then I sand it all down, and then literally these are all ready to be sprayed. So here's the rear guard. I'd given this a second coat just to make sure it was all ready to go. There's all the parts ready for final colour, and I've had colour mixed exactly to what it was original, and I do improvise quite a bit, as you might see in my other videos. So I've just made up various brackets and stands to hold everything. And first I paint inside the frame and all the awkward bits, and you can see the finish on that paint comes up awesome. And once I got to this point, I let it dry just for a few minutes, and then here I'm putting on the final coats on the frame. So I just position it so I could get good access down the sides. I put 2 or 3 coats on, and that is enough really. And you can see that there's been no problems whatsoever. The paint went on really nicely, so very happy with that. And I do really like this colour, and I didn't want to change it, so that's how it was from the factory. And it is spot on, and no doubt the finish of this is probably a bit shinier than what it was back in the 60s when it was first built. So I spray all the parts. Here's the frame with it finished, and you can see the finish straight off the gun. I don't even think I'm going to polish this. It's come up well enough just to leave it as it is. It's nice and smooth and shiny, and I was actually lucky there was no grit that even went into that frame. There's a tiny bit of grit on the rear guard, but I'll just sand that out and buff it. So once it dries, I clean up all this front suspension, put the struts back in, or the shockers, and they all bolt up pretty easy. And amazing, they still work pretty good. They're the original, so they certainly don't make things like they used to. Now, the steering bearings are just loose balls, so what I do is I put some grease in there to hold the balls in position and carefully put them all in, and that grease holds them, as you can see here. And then once they're all positioned, I simply lower in the stem, the steering stem, and then once that's positioned, I do the same on the top, and you can see I just use a bit of grease on a screwdriver to allow me to get them in the right spot. And from memory, I think there was 20 balls on the top and the bottom, and there's the inner race. Push that into position, lock it down, and pretty simple, and that's the steering done. So at this point, steering's done. I did respoke these rims in the last video, and I haven't, seen how square or true they're running, so this is what I'm doing here. So before I put the tyre on, I just fix it to the bike so I can rotate it, and once it's in there, you'll see it's certainly not acceptable. It's wobbling all over the place. Now, this is the first one I've done, but the logic makes sense to me on how to do this. So the spokes just pull either way, and you'll see there's spokes that pull to the left and to the right. I make that bit of wire there, so I use that as a marker. And the first thing I do, and you'll see that I'm not really getting it right left to right, because what I'm doing is I'm trying to get it to run true first. So rotationally, I'm trying to get it so that it's accurate. And then once I get that far, moving the rim left to right is actually quite easy, because you just loosen one side and tighten the other side, and it just simply pulls over. So bit of messing about. You can see here it's getting much closer, and here it is. And you know what? That is pretty much spot on. So I was really happy with that. And then I just did the same on the rear. So once I got this far, I bought a couple of new tyres. I put the tyres on, and I'll probably fine tune the spoke tension and maybe the accuracy of those when it's all back together. I'm not sure, but they're pretty close the way they are. Put the tube in, and then just with the tyre levers, push the tyre back in, and there you go. That's the front, and again I just do the same on the rear. So with the front, with the spokes all tensioned up, just mount this in there again and do it up, and that's basically the front end is pretty much done. Now here's the rear drive. You can see that rubber's totally shot. I managed to find a new genuine rubber, which was quite lucky, so I'll put that in. And once that's in, same thing, is put the wheel on there, centralize it, which I've done here, and then I'll put the suspension back on, and the rear swing arm, which I'm doing here, and the rear shockers as well, actually pretty good as well. So all I did was clean them up and put them on. So just before I do is I just tap the holes out again, because a little bit of paint went in there, and it's always good practice, I think, just to use a tap to clean out any threads. Just makes life easier down the track for maintenance. Here's the original shockers, believe it or not. All I did was give them a bit of a rub down with steel wool, using quadruple O steel wool, and they turn out really good. And then I gave them a light coat of clear just out of a spray can, just so they wouldn't rust again. So put both rear shocks on, tension it up, and then at that point it's ready to put the wheel in. I've got a new sprocket coming, so the sprocket's not fitted yet, but I just put it in there loose just so that I can actually roll the bike around. Once that's in, I'd again just tension up just loosely, and then what I do is put the center stand in place, so that I can turn this over and actually roll it and have it standing up on its own, which um, makes life much easier. So there it is, starting to come together. It's a roller at least, and the next stage will be putting the motor in, wiring it all up, and then actually getting ready for its first start. So good progress, and hopefully in the next video I'll get this running. Stay tuned.